Hello and welcome back to Politically Incorrect. I'm Carmen Christiano. Well, tonight we have a truly outstanding panel for our annual post-election analysis show. Well, usually whenever there's an election, 1 week later on the Politically Incorrect show, we get a panel together and we discuss the election. So today is exactly 1 week after the big national and state election that we had last Tuesday. So now we have a great panel to discuss it. And it's good that we waited 1 week because it took 4 or 5 days for Florida to get all the returns in. And now that they're all in, we have the exact electoral vote count. And with me tonight, we have Joe Kearns Goodwin. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being back on the show, Joe. It's your second time on the show.
Absolutely.
First time just a month or 2 months ago, maybe, about that. And when you ran for state senate.
Indeed.
And you work with the home base program, right? You're doing a lot with that?
I do, yeah. My wife, Victoria, who's actually here tonight watching us from the audience, and I are both on the advisory board for the home base program, which is an incredible organization. And what it does, it's a partnership between the Mass General Hospital and the Red Sox Foundation. They treat the invisible wounds of war. That's post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. And they do great work. And they've really done a lot for our communities.
And since Veterans Day was this past Sunday, I understand you were on MSNBC with just yesterday, right?
That's right. We were talking, I was on the Andrea Mitchell show yesterday to talk a little bit about what it was that sort of drove me as a resident of Concord, a graduate from Harvard, to join the Army in the days after 9/11, and also what it's meant to me to have served over 6 years on active duty, 2 different tours, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan, and how much I got out of that. You know, I put a lot into it, but I got much more out of it. But I think also what Andrea was focused on, which is really important, what Home Base is focused on, is figuring out how to serve our veterans, not only giving the support they need overseas, but also figuring out how do we serve them and their families when they come home.
Yes.
Because I think that's really important. That's the next big challenge for us as a nation, to make sure we do that correctly.
Yes, I hope so. There was just, I think it was 60 Minutes last week, or the Sunday morning show on CBS, that they were talking about post-traumatic stress, not only for the individual who was in Iraq and Afghanistan, but they were interviewing his spouse, and she was having nightmares and all kinds of problems because the poor guy came back with a lot of problems.
No, and I think that's...
It's so sad. I think it's terrible.
I mean, it's terrible and it's sad, but it's also something we can do something about. Once we diagnose the problem, we can start to come up with solutions. And this state, I will say, Coleman Nee, who's the Secretary of Veterans Affairs in the state right now, has done an amazing job making sure we have the infrastructure to support veterans and their families. Yes. But we need to do more in getting outreach to the people that come home from these conflicts to figure out who they are and connect them with the services that they need. Yes. I think it's tremendously important. In fact, the governor, I was privileged enough to be appointed the chair, one of the co-chairs of his Veteran Students Advisory Boards, which he just formed. And I think it's important not only to make sure our student veterans get the benefits they deserve, that they earned, that they fought for, but also that the other students in the classroom have an understanding that, hey, you know, that guy who's 10 years older than you, sitting next to you in that chair, might have gone through different experiences, so how do you interact with him? Yes. So that's kind of our mission. I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much for doing that and for serving the country as you did. You had so many options available to you, and for you to volunteer like that, I think is outstanding and deserves a great deal of credit by all the citizens, I think, of this country.
Well,
so thank you, Joe.
Well, thank you. It really was my honor.
Thanks for being here, too. And we have also my good friend, Jim Arciero, State Representative, with us tonight. How are you, Jim?
Great. Thank you for having me on. This is, I think this is 14.
I have 8th.
Well, I thought it was 14.
I'm going with Jim.
I think it was 14.
Oh, my God. Maybe I missed a row or something.
You'd have checked those notes, Carmen.
Oh, right. Maybe I missed.
So you're keeping your own tally?
I have to when I come to the show.
Oh, my God.
I challenge you to that. We take the Pepsi challenge.
Okay, yeah, we'll take a Pepsi challenge. Because I actually checked online today, which is my latest list. It's the one on the computer. But I might have missed. It's 8 per row, right? But somehow maybe I missed.
I don't know.
And maybe
I don't know. Joe
row.
had such a great intro that he
I think we're going to have
to
talk about that. That's right.
Up
That's
his game.
He's doing
well,
great.
well,
Sure,
as
you
everyone.
take your shoes off so you can count properly.
Well, I know. I know that Carmen clearly is rattled by this.
Oh no, no, it's not a big
Are
deal.
you
but,
questioning his
but,
spreadsheet?
I don't know.
But the Godfather did check, but I could be wrong, though. I'll admit that I could
Okay.
be wrong, but I'll check again when I get home.
What do you think this is, Florida here?
Yeah.
And
We need a
we'll
recount.
put the answer online.
Right,
so it'll
right,
be with
yeah.
no debate.
I think you'd have to do that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Breaking news
Well,
on the
thanks for
patch.
being here again.
Yeah, no,
though,
it's
Jim.
great
It's
to be
always
on.
great having you on the show.
Sure.
And You also came on before the election. You ran for re-election this year against a Republican opponent, Valerie Wormill,
Yep.
I guess, and you beat her in the election. We'll talk about that later
Sure,
on in the
of course.
show. And you'll give us your insights and how it all went and what comments you have about that.
That'd be super.
And also we'll be talking about the presidential race, the U.S. Senate race, and congressional races and all kinds of things. So thanks for being here, Jim.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
And thanks. We have my good friend Nick DeSilvio with us. How are you, Nick?
Very good, Carmen.
And I also call you Capo Nick, but that's just between us, right? Nobody knows that but us.
And my kids.
Yeah, and the
They
kids.
know
Capo
that.
Nick. So Nick, as everyone knows, is a member of the Chelmsford School Committee, and you're currently in your second term, right, Nick?
Correct.
So, you're a member of the Republican Party.
Correct.
So tonight we have basically 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans on the show to talk about the election. So thanks for being here, Nick,
You're
on the show.
welcome.
And I know
Thank
you
you,
do so much,
thank
but we have so little time on the show. We can't mention everything you do. So much with sports and coaching and with
Well,
all your
just-
children. It's
all that-
amazing.
Yep, it's just keeping you busy.
Yeah.
Keeps you young.
Oh, and a co-owner of a show, Proteum Technologies,
Proteum
is it called?
Technologies, yep.
Something like that. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be
You're
here.
welcome. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
My honor.
And thanks, my good friend Janet Askenburg, for being here again on your. By the way, it's Nick's 7th time on the show, Janet's 6th time on the show.
You
Okay,
sure it's a
great.
set? No.
I don't get hung up on numbers,
Right.
but, you know.
So 6th time, and you're the chairwoman of the Chelmsford School Committee, as everybody knows.
That's correct.
And you're completing your first term.
That's correct.
Around this time, and you'll be up again for re-election in April, or you'll decide to maybe run for another office. And you'll probably let us know at some other show what you want to do. Maybe not tonight.
Okay. Are you
What-
telling me?
No, I'm asking you. Are you comfortable in giving you
Getting
well, wait
prepared.
to give
Getting
you plans.
prepared for 4 years from now. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Forget about Chris
I'm
Christie.
just
We got
enjoying the
Janet
moment.
Askenburg.
I'm just enjoying the moment right
I
now.
wanted to run for governor sometime, though. That would be nice. I think you do a great job.
Thank you.
Well,
And,
bodyguard.
Yeah. And Janet also does so much more around town and with her business, too. We're doing very well. A principal in her business. So I know, thank you for taking the time also
Yeah,
for your
no
busy
problem.
schedule.
I appreciate
So-
you inviting me.
So as everybody can see, we have an outstanding panel on the show tonight. And why don't we start with the presidential election to talk about that at first. Maybe if we could start with Joe Kearns Goodwin. And that is the President Barack Obama ended up with 332 electoral votes.
Indeed.
And Mitt Romney ended up with 206 electoral votes. So there's quite a difference there in the electoral vote count. The popular vote count was much closer,
Much
like 3
narrower.
million
Yeah.
difference. So President Obama won by about 3 million or plus or minus votes. So he won a pretty good victory, the president did, for re-election. So first I thought with your overall comments, and then we'll maybe get into specifics later. So Joe, your overall comments about the presidential race?
Well, I think that there are 2 probably main points that I think that are really salient for us to take away from this election. The first is that the Republican Party, I think, has to realize that there's such a disparity in the votes that go towards Democrats from people of color, from recent immigrants, that unless they reach out and embrace something like comprehensive immigration reform, they will never find a path to victory to the White House.
Yeah.
The other comment is, so President Obama did just win a pretty decisive victory. I mean, he got 9 million less votes than he got in 2008, but I also think because of that, he has a mandate that he has to use now. And because that will fade as time goes on, and all of a sudden you'll get the intransience of the opposition before you know it. And it's incumbent upon him, it's a real responsibility upon him, on all of our leaders up there, to sort of understand they need to moderate their positions, whether it's from the left or the right, to come up with solutions that will actually move our country forward. I mean, listen, if Hamilton and Madison and Jefferson and Adams, these are people who hated each other, and yet they wrote our Constitution, and they forged our fledgling country, and they brought it through the first very pivotal 40 years, and they did that because they were willing to compromise. And I think that compromise has become a dirty word in some circles in politics. I don't think it ever should. And I think that President Obama needs to go out and be like, okay, I have this mandate right now. How do I use this? Not for political gain for the Democrats, not to disparage the Republicans, but to move our country forward.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. Thanks. Nick DeSilvio, your overall comments first?
And I see 2 issues. First and foremost, it was really disappointing from a standpoint of total amount of votes cast. Total, both parties. Actually, all individuals. We got about 12 million less people voted. That's disappointing. You know what I mean? either side. It doesn't matter because the president received roughly, I think, about 8 million less votes than he did from his first election. And if I'm not mistaken, Mitt Romney, Governor Romney, received about 3 million, I think 2 or 3 million less votes than John McCain received. So that's a significant amount of individuals that did not vote. I mean, what discouraged them from coming out to vote? So that bothers me a little bit. And you know, one of the things that I think the Republican Party needs to do is they really need to do some soul searching. I think they really need to go back to their core beliefs. I believe that you do have to, you know, moderate yourself from a standpoint of negotiating and working with people, and that's fine. But you can't give up your core values. If your core values are X, then you can't just do something totally different. You need to have a stand on what you believe and then hold by that stand. Otherwise, your base is not going to come out and support you.
Yes.
And I think that was part of Mitt Romney's problem, Governor Romney's problem.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks. Jim Arciero?
Thank you. I think two issues come to mind, and Joe and Nick hit on it early on in their comments. One is the fact that if you recall, in the presidential primaries, I remember that that Governor Romney tended to have a sort of a stronger, if not stricter, policy on immigration. And at the time, I think he was trying to make sure that he got, of course, the core conservative supporters and investors, if you will, politically at that time. And I don't know if that necessarily flew with a lot of the Latino voters and folks, especially in Florida. I think it was the first time in Cuba, the Cuban voters in Florida supported a Democratic candidate in probably 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, this is big.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was a massive sort of message, I think, to a lot of Latino voters, and we're seeing how the country is changing as well.
Yes.
That was a major piece, and I think that was a big flaw by the Romney campaign. I think it was also Romney's, his sort of stand on the auto industry as well.
Yes.
That was something that sent a message to swing states, and I think that paid serious dividends for the Democratic Party come the election.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Janet?
I always think of politics just in a very almost basic form. In fact, people like to do business with, and people will elect people that they can relate to, that they think they can like, that can understand them. And I don't think that many people obviously thought that Mitt Romney could relate to their situation. And I think that includes within the Republican Party. I found this also with Scott Brown. I was a supporter of Scott Brown, obviously a supporter of Mitt Romney as well. But when you're kind of riding the fence and you're not really passionate on one side or the other, you're not going to get that kind of passion back from your supporters. Yeah. And I think that was what happened with Scott Brown as well, is he kept trying to play almost both sides. Right. And there's no passion. Yes. I didn't see a whole lot of passion in the Republican Party for Mitt Romney, quite honestly. I saw it more as a vote against Obama. And I also didn't see a lot of passion, quite honestly, for Scott Brown. I saw it as more of a vote against Elizabeth Warren, because I don't think the Republicans were that strong against Scott Brown either.
If you looked at it, Scott ran away from his label of being a Republican for the last, I would say, probably 3 weeks in the election. He ran away from that.
Sure.
Oh,
And you really can't do that, because when you look at, and I'm not a big believer of it, but if you look at that ticket, it says Elizabeth Warren, Democrat. Scott Brown, Republican. You can't walk away from that label.
Yes.
It's your label. You're on that ticket.
Right.
So you have to embrace it.
Yes.
Otherwise, people are not going to believe it.
Yeah.
One thing I will add, just to follow up on your comment, I think actually what President Obama and his campaign were able to do was amazingly make it a choice between who do you want more, Mitt Romney or President Barack Obama. Because had it been a referendum on President Obama's policies, I don't see how he could have won, because people are not happy with things, how things done in the last 4 years. So I think making a choice of those two individuals is actually a great move on our side to make that happen. So that's when people said, okay, which one of these people do I want for the next 4 years? And he was able to change the dialogue from the last 4 years to the next 4 years, which I think was actually incredibly helpful to him. Now, I don't disagree with you on the Scott Brown aspect at all.
Speaking of Scott Brown, did you notice his postcards? He had a picture of him, I think, with President Obama in the postcard, but not Mitt Romney, which goes to your point. So I found that very interesting.
A couple of things with that is, first is the fact that during the convention, Scott Brown, who is arguably one of the most popular politicians in Massachusetts, whereas his popularity was starting to wane a little bit, refused to go to the convention to be
Yeah,
identified as a Republican, I assume.
that's right.
Yeah.
I had talked to a top sort of Republican operative soon after the election, and the main sort of argument I thought with a lot of Republicans or a lot of conservative independents was the fact that Scott Brown, he was bucking the trend. He was a maverick, if you will. He cared about conservative issues, but he was also able to identify with conservative Democrats and sort of bring them over. And a lot of the arguments that they used from the Republican side too was that Elizabeth Warren was nothing more than just a rubber stamp. She was a manufactured candidate as a Democrat. Now remember this, for 18 years, Scott Brown, that he was in the legislature, I think it was actually 16, I don't recall him being really a maverick in the state house of the state legislature. So in some ways, he was a manufactured candidate for the Republican Party to make sure you could win or stay or sustain your office within a Democratic state. So I think Brown's problem was he started to sort of lose his identity. Eventually, like Nick says, you got to choose somebody.
Yeah.
You got to be with somebody. Regardless of that, I think his election was also a perfect storm of a lot of events, and we can get to that.
Right, but the thing with Scott, excuse me, Tom, the thing with Scott Brown was, you look at his first election, and what was his big thing? I'm not Ted Kennedy.
Right.
You know what I
Well,
mean? I'm
people
not
see.
that liberal, heavy left-leaning. So people, especially conservatives,
Sure.
latched onto that. Well, he ran away from that this year, and I think that hurt him. Plus, it was a presidential election.
Right,
You knew,
exactly.
you knew that that was going to be
2010,
difficult.
in
It's just numbers.
2010,
It's
a
just
little
numbers.
over 2 million people came out to vote in that special election.
Right.
In the presidential,
Right.
it was about 3.3 million.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had to make up 800,000.
No, I think, Nick, this is exactly back to your point. Why don't we get more people to vote? Because I will tell you, just from my own personal experience, in my primary for the state senate in this area, we had maybe 20,000 people vote. There were 60,000 people who voted in this general election. And had those people come out before, it would have been maybe a different story. But the fact of the matter is, no matter who you vote for, no matter what you do, the more people involved in the process, the better it is. And I think you're right. That's one of the things that we should look at.
Well,
what was that 9 million drop off, and where did that come
That's
from?
true, because you have you have 4 different districts in Colorado that voted at 104 to 107% of the amount of individuals that can vote
I
in
didn't
those
hear
different
that.
pricings. Oh yeah, there are.
I'm
There's
trying to work
4
on the math.
I know
How's
you
that
figure
work?
it out. You go,
Yeah.
how does that happen? Well, I don't even want to get to it, but then you look at the registered voters in any one of the precincts, and if you're at 104%.
But-
you know,
But hey, listen, man, I'd rather be at 104 than 50.
listen, I want to be at 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree
Well,
with you.
you
I
wanna
agree
go
with
there.
you.
could I be
Yes.
politically incorrect on this?
Yeah.
I don't agree with people just going out to vote for voting's sake. I want people who know the
Educated.
candidates, study the
Yep.
issues, know what they're
Yep.
doing, rather than going in and picking A, B, and C and guessing, or they have a vowel at the end of the last name, so I'm going to vote for them or not vote for them. You know what I mean? Hey. So I think the voters should be educated, know what they're doing. I want responsible people to make an appropriate decision based upon the policies, the issues, the candidates. So I'm not of this ilk that you should just vote to get out there and vote and everybody.
so
you
when
know.
our forefathers
So I'm
put-
politically incorrect, but that's what I believe.
So when our forefathers put the Constitution together and they said only landowners can vote, that was all right?
I'm not talking about everybody has to own land, but that's what they did at that time.
Well, you know what? Yeah, let me
But
push
you know,
back on that a
they
little
were
bit.
getting back to a similar idea,
Right, I
though.
understand.
Probably at
Yeah,
that time,
responsible
people were
individuals
literate.
that-
Probably at that time, if they owned land, maybe they knew how to read and knew some basic understanding about what was going on. So that's probably where they were coming from. Plus, they set up a
Understood.
republic rather than an absolute democracy. We have representatives
Yep.
for us because they are expected to really be up on all the issues before they make a vote in the legislature. So I think they set it up properly, but I really want educated voters out there, which is the reason
Agreed.
why we do this show,
Well, you
by
know
the
what?
way.
I would push back on a little bit because I do believe that anybody who gets out of bed in the morning, gets in their car, drives to the voting booth, has spent enough time and energy already to at least approach with some discernment the ballot they have in front of them. So I think our goal of 100% is exactly what we want. You're not going to get that just by
Well,
throwing
would-
ballots into people's homes and just
But-
having them fill
Well,
out
how would they know?
willy-nilly.
How would they know how to vote unless they've studied the issues?
Well,
Some people don't
that-
even know who the candidates
Well,
were,
that
don't
is-
even know who their
Yeah, but maybe what's important to them
is what?
is enough. Maybe they see a woman on the ballot. I'm not one of those
Yeah,
people
sure,
that votes
yeah.
for a woman.
Sure.
But maybe they see somebody
Maybe.
their last name ends in an I or some other kind of vowel, and that's
Oh.
important enough to them.
Well, here's an interesting
But my
thing.
point is that doesn't make sense though, because that may not be
But
good
that's
for
to
their
you.
country.
But that's to you.
But I know from my opinion, and I think for the entire country, it doesn't make sense to vote for people who may have diametrically opposed positions to what you really believe in. It just doesn't make any
You
sense.
know how you take that? You know how you give someone the responsibility? You take away the little title they have next to their name. You remove Democrat and Republican, and it forces an individual to figure out who that
Yeah.
person is. That's the best way to do
Yeah,
it.
I think we
Take
have too
away the
much-
D and the
yeah.
R next to names, and have people look at the individuals and what they can help
Yeah.
you, your community, your state, and your national government.
fact,
Take
some
the
of our
names away. See
founding-
what happens.
Yeah, some of
Be
our founding
interesting.
fathers
Interesting idea.
did not
You know?
want the political parties in the founding
Right.
of our nation, right, Joe?
I-
Didn't your
I-
mother write about that probably?
Well,
or-
she's not gone that far back.
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
She's her most
Down to Lincoln, right?
Lincoln is as far back as she goes, and there were definitely political parties then. In
Yes,
fact,
yeah.
that was the ascendancy of the Republican Party
Republican
over
Party,
the
yeah,
Whigs.
she was the first.
But they were much more like Democrats at the time.
Yeah,
That's why
yes.
they saved the nation.
Yeah.
That's right, no doubt.
Yeah.
But no, I think, yeah, there was never sort of this idea of political parties that we have now that have become so entrenched.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, it was an absolute pleasure and an honor to run for the Democratic nomination for state senate now. And I agree with so much of what the Democratic Party agrees with. But were I not looking at something like that as a job I might want to do or something I felt that I could do, being an unenrolled individual, just as you say, makes a lot of sense, because then you literally
yeah.
can just choose the person
That's what-
that
Right.
you support.
That's what I
And
agree.
that makes sense.
I'm an unenrolled individual.
As long as you vote for Jim.
Yeah, right.
I'll never forget my district that I represent is 66% independent, unenrolled.
unenrolled, yes,
And so,
yeah,
you know, it behooves a representative from either party to take that into consideration on issues, on votes, and do
Yes.
the best they can for the people you represent.
I
So.
agree.
Absolutely.
In
In
any
fact-
other state, he'd be a Republican.
And you know,
Hey, that's easy.
in Massachusetts, I believe we only have 11% registered Republicans, something like 36% registered Democrats, and all the others are registered
Unenrolled.
unenrolled. Or I like
And
to
that's
call us
been
independents.
growing. It's
yeah,
like-
and
yeah,
it should
yeah.
be. That way
yeah,
you're
the
not.
unenrolled sounds very passive.
I know.
It
I
does.
don't like that.
I don't
And
like.
you
I always
should
say
get
independent.
out of
I always
bed
say
In fact, I
independent.
want Jim to maybe look at getting that changed to independent instead of unenrolled.
Well, he's got some
Didn't
sway
I
up
mention
there.
that to you
I
at one
know.
point?
He's
But I
got,
don't
he's
know.
got the pull right
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, Jim could
Make
do
it
it.
So to
happen.
get back on the U.S. Senate race, that was actually the most expensive race in Massachusetts history.
That's ridiculous.
$73 million.
I know, it's crazy.
Now here's an
Unbelievable.
interesting
And
thing.
that doesn't even include the $300 million. The $80 million that was some of the super PAC money.
I would love to take forget about the super PAC money, but I would take a list of both candidates and look down that list and how much of that money came from out of state.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you can get that.
Yeah.
I know.
That's all
I'm
available,
just
yeah.
I'm just taking.
Yeah, oh,
how much
yeah,
of
I
that?
think
So
Good
I guess
Insane.
the more fundamental question is, if you were to get that list and you saw that Elizabeth Warren had 55% of the state, Scott Brown had 60% of the state, do you think somehow they would not represent Massachusetts as well because people in the rest of the country understood this is a very important election?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Yes. Because you're going to be beholden to individuals that got you to where you are.
There
You're
is
gonna
no
be.
free lunch.
Exactly. You are going to be beholden to whoever it is. I don't care if it's Scott or Elizabeth Warren.
I mean,
And it may not be today, but it's going to be
At
tomorrow
some-
or
at some
somewhere
point.
down the line.
But
Absolutely.
I will say, I mean, one of my great heroes, and maybe not your greatest, one of yours, I'm sure, Senator Kennedy said, if you can't take someone's money and then vote against them, you don't belong in the job.
Right.
That's a nice saying.
That's nice.
But
That's
is
a
it, you
nice
know
thing,
what?
yeah.
But there's also, I mean, there was an amazing NPR story that Barney Frank was on, another one of my heroes. You guys maybe don't agree with that, but he said that, listen, he had been in many conference committees where they said, I can't vote for this because my constituents would kill me. But he never was in a conference committee where he said, I can't vote, or someone else said, I can't vote for this because my donors will kill me.
And
Yes.
Would somebody actually say that out
really,
loud?
I mean, have you ever been to Washington?
Then they're too stupid to be in that position.
Right, they're not that smart. I
Do you
mean,
watch Homeland, by the way?
Oh, yes.
This Sunday night, they had this very rich guy living in a huge mansion, and the vice president comes in along with the potential, vice president plans to run for president. This guy is backing him. And he also is picking out this other guy, you know, one of the stars of Homeland, to become the vice. He says, I want you to run for vice president. So somehow these multimillionaires, maybe a billionaire in the show, really is having a lot of influence about candidates. And I think some of that does go on in this country,
I
right?
think you're probably right.
Joe, let me.
But they
let me-
shouldn't dictate things. But anyway.
Take two individuals, George Soros and one of the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
Okay, pick whichever party side you want. They donate to an individual, two separate candidates, both running each other. Election's over, one of their candidates, wins. Now, something comes up, an issue comes up, and they pick up the phone and they dial the number, and guess what? They will pick up the phone.
Sure. Well,
Will they not pick up the phone?
I know. I think
Okay,
you're
they'll
right.
pick
But
up-
let me
and
tell you
I
this.
guarantee you that phone call will be very influential.
Well,
and that's the problem.
So I will say, I mean, listen, I do think we need comprehensive campaign finance reform.
I agree.
There's no doubt.
I
mean, the
agree.
fact of the matter is, when I was running for office this summer, I spent 3 hours of the day on the phone raising money, which is ridiculous. I should be out there meeting constituents,
Right.
figuring out what the
Right.
real needs are. I will say, but our first step is just to reset things back to 3 years ago before Citizens United, because George Soros or the Koch brothers would not have had the influence they could have had if they could only write a $2,500 check or maybe ask their
Right.
friends to write a bit. But now they can literally give millions into those campaigns.
But that law needs to be adjusted so unions can't have to
I
fall,
agree.
part of it.
fall
That's
under the
absolutely part of
same
it. I
responsibility
completely
as
agree.
corporations.
And
part
I
of
think,
it, right.
I think
And
on our
individuals.
side, that's why we need to move on Citizens United right away, because it's not just going to be the rich influences on one side. It's also going to be the other side, and people get used to having that tool in their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to make sure we get rid of it right away, as soon as possible, so people don't get used to it, so we can have the unions on the right side of this issue. Because you're absolutely right; they will get sort of used to that power as well.
Right.
It's interesting. Since I ran, I don't take money from lobbyists and political action committees. Right, I'm one of the few in the state that doesn't do it. When I worked in Senate Ways and Means, I did notice that that PAC money and a $500 check or a $200 check does influence legislators. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. Recently, Jamie Eldridge had filed this. He's a state senator from Acton, had filed this resolution to have Congress act on repealing Citizens United, which I was one of the first sort of co-sponsors of it. And in my race, 2 weeks out, there was super PAC money coming from southeastern Mass that actually undisclosed. There was a few attack ads supporting my opponent, in which my opponent only raised $8,000, and so there's not a lot of room to even do more than one mailing. And 4 mailings in the last 5 days, distorting my
That's
record and
incredible.
attacking
Yeah,
me.
it's
It's never the
terrible.
nicest thing, but I agree with you though. I think it should be across the board. And in fact, the resolution, Nick, did call for union money as well, to be disclosed, to know what's happening here,
Yeah.
and to just stop this.
Yeah, no. In fact,
So-
in my hometown of Concord, we had a non-binding referendum to support just that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hopefully-
it's true. It's I think the more sort of special interest and the more money we can sort of get out of this process, the better we are.
I agree entirely. And maybe if we could finish up a little bit and talk more about the presidential
Yes.
race,
Yeah, sure.
and then we'll move on to U.S. Senate, then Congresswoman Nikki Tsongas is raised, etc. But how about if we talk a little bit, if you want, about the debates on the presidential level, because this year, I think they were pivotal in a way. You saw what happened after that first debate. And I remember vividly, Chris Christie was on the Sunday morning talk show as governor of New Jersey. And everybody thought he was like crazy because he was saying, watch after that first debate, this race is going to be reset, because at that time, before the debate, President Obama looks like he was going to run away with it. And Governor Chris Christie made the prediction, a bold prediction, that after that first debate, the race is going to be reset because Mitt Romney is going to do so great in that debate. And that's exactly what happened, that, as we all know, and President Obama will agree, he didn't do very well in that debate. Mitt Romney did very well. And the race got extremely tight right after that. Then the subsequent 2 debates were somewhat close, you would say. I would say President Obama
I
probably
would
won.
say the second debate was pretty even, and then the third one, Obama got it. I don't
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
in the world happened
Yeah.
to Romney on that
Yeah.
third one.
Sure.
He tried to come across, I think,
Again,
very
middle of the
gentlemanly,
road, did
middle of the
not-
road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I agree.
Oh, he
that's like-
agreed with the president
Yeah.
on so many things in that third debate. So how about just talk
Well,
a
never
little bit,
forget.
you want
Never
about
forget.
that?
Also, probably about a week or 2 before that was the famous sort of 47% comment
Yes.
Yeah.
before that debate, and then Romney clearly won that debate decisively, the first debate,
first
and
one,
that, as you said, reset everything. And then just like what Janet said, things started to sort of slip away from Romney then, and then I was talking to some of my favorite Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle here, and we were talking a little bit about Governor Christie and your feelings about Governor Christie and sort of his support of the president down the stretch, and kind of how that affected things as well.
Yeah, that was like the October surprise.
Yeah, exactly, after the storm.
The big storm.
But
I don't know.
But I will say, I mean, I do think the third debate, you're right, President Obama probably won that decisively. But then again, I mean, this is a person who, the foreign policy as a subject for the last debate is a little unfair to any, because no one else in the country is going to know foreign policy as well as the President of the United States, who has to deal with it day in and day out and gets a briefing day in and day out. I do think the first debate was decisive. And I think if you look at all the polls, the usual bump you get from a good performance sustained itself with Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was because the president did badly. I think it's because Mitt Romney did so well. And so there are a lot of people who
You
said—
don't think Obama did badly?
No, he
in
definitely
that
did.
first-
He definitely
Okay.
did. I completely agree that he did. But I'm saying I don't think that was what sustained Mitt Romney's bump. I think it was there were a lot of people in this country who said, I'm not happy with the way things have been, but I really don't like this other guy, especially because the Obama campaign had so successfully framed him for many, many months. And so what they were able to see there is, hey, this might be a viable alternative. You know, for the first time they've ever seen that. He's not just a flip-flopper. He's not just this moderate Republican. Maybe this is someone I can see as my president.
Right.
And it was his ability to communicate that, I think, more than President Obama's inability to show up in that debate, although I think he killed the last two.
Yes.
That I think sustained the bump, sort of the post-debate to bump that you see it sometimes.
He basically came out, the governor came out pretty fired up in the first debate, and the governor was put into this little box by the president, like you stated. They did a very, very nice job for months before that first debate, putting him into this one little impression that folks got of him. And then in that debate, folks looked at him and said, "Wow, it's nothing like that. He's a pretty good guy." And I think
Or good enough.
Well, no, he was a pretty good guy, and what and I think what people saw during that first debate, and the president started to change his tone afterwards, is that the president kept coming out and saying, well, you know, you're a bad guy, and because of X, and never really coming out and saying, this is what I'm going to do for you. You know what I mean? This is what's going to happen in the next 4 years, and trying to frame that going forward. He spent a lot of time, and even through that all three debates, he spent a lot of time bashing, you know, the governor and his policies and what he's going to do. Never really spent a lot of time talking about the policies that he's going to go forward with in those years. And in that first one, it was clear and very apparent that there was a huge difference there. In the second one, because the governor backed off, and in the third one even more so, backed off of that strong stance, people said, well, they just sit back and look at TV. Well, maybe I was a little mistaken during that first one. Maybe he isn't as strong as he could have, because he didn't come across that.
But I had read that supposedly he did that because women don't like conflict and they're turned off by that. I don't get that personally, but they're turned off by that.
Conflict.
So he's you know, he's trying to tone it down a little bit,
Right.
trying to look very presidential.
Yes.
Let Obama be the one who's
Right.
who's all aggressive and arrogant, and he was, and they still like him.
Right. And I also thought in the first debate too, I mean, clearly the president was very passive. He kind of wanted, you know, Romney to have his say in a way.
Yeah.
A lot of folks also thought that he didn't want to give the opportunity for Romney to apologize to the American people by bringing up the 47% issue. And, you know, there's history that says that essentially that, you know, people tend to forgive politicians when they make their, you know, they claim their mistakes and they owe to the American people. So that's possible
Yeah.
too. So.
The only thing I'd like to add, and I think you're right, I think Governor Romney did an incredible job in the first debate that definitely helped him out. But I also think when people talk about how President Obama didn't show up and he wasn't there, I mean, you understand this man has the most important job in the world.
Yeah.
And Mitt Romney's literally been running for president for 5 years. So
Yeah.
it's not surprising to me he was a little more prepared for a debate than the guy who's actually trying to lead our country and the
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, in my opinion, Mitt Romney ran way to the right during the primaries to try to get
Yes,
the
he
nomination.
had to.
You
In
have
fact,
to.
he called himself a severe conservative. Remember that term?
Yeah,
Severe
yeah.
conservative. And then on the first debate,
Right.
it was that Etch-a-Sketch
I see
moment,
Etch-a-Sketch, yeah.
and he just dropped everything and he went more moderate then. And
Right.
that's why he started getting more support throughout the country, because he was no longer the Mitt Romney of a month or two before, right?
Yeah.
Didn't
Wasn't
it
he?
happen
He was-
4 years ago on
Yeah.
the Democratic side?
Oh, it
You had
happened.
the same exact thing. You have, you know, Hillary Clinton
It
running
happens a
a
lot,
little
yes.
more
Right.
towards the middle,
Yeah.
and President at
Well-
the time, you know,
Yes.
Senator Obama
Right.
running heavily to the left, and what happened?
Yeah.
You
But
know,
on
he ended up
fundamental,
winning.
fundamental Republican issues, on platform issues like abortion and platform issues, you know, such as immigration. You know, Mitt had in healthcare. I mean, talk about a polarizing issue. I mean, so I think he was very concerned about making sure he, you know, you to win now before you can win later.
Those issues really never hit. That was the other problem with
in a primary they do though.
But the problem was that in the general election, he was advised. I speculate, but I'm sure he was advised to discuss one thing: the economy. Pound the economy to no end.
Yes.
Never discussed really foreign policy. Never really discussed any of the big issues because they didn't want, they were afraid. And you want to know something? Evangelicals are going to be concerned about some of those issues. And guess what? That's part of the Republican base.
Right.
Yep.
You have to discuss those issues. They have to be important. That's part of the passion of politics.
Yes.
And they missed it, right or wrong.
No, but
right
I would say
wrong.
you would say you're right. The issue of immigration never came up in
Should've.
debate. You know, healthcare never really came up. But I guarantee you, they affected a whole lot of voters in places like Florida, in places like New Mexico and Arizona, which the Republicans won. They did have an impact. They were not forefront, but I think it's because they were part and parcel with a certain platform. It just led people to one side or the other. But a more rigorous debate might have been more rational so that people could actually decide the individuals.
Right. 3 million less people voted for Governor Romney than Senator McCain.
But I bring up those points.
6 million less for President Obama.
I bring up these points really to back to your sort of question of why he went so you know, conservative in the primary, and he had no choice really, because he's trying to define to everybody that he wasn't a flip-flopper on healthcare. He was, you know, before he was against it.
Yes, right.
You know, and you know, of course, all the other issues with.
I think you just come across when you do that as very disingenuous.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just trying to get elected.
Right.
You're not actually putting yourself out there with conviction to say,
And it's
this is what I believe, and if you don't agree, then don't vote for me.
Exactly.
But this is who
And
I
I think
am.
he really did want to get elected, and I sincerely believe he'd say just about anything, Mitt Romney, to get elected. And I think a lot of people in this country know that
Well,
about him.
unfortunately, what he didn't say in that third
Other
debate
people don't do
is
that,
hammer.
except for Jim Arciero.
No, I think there's
Most
a lot
other
of people who have a core conviction. You don't see that much change. I think in the President Obama, you didn't see that much change in his position,
Because he's
if
cast in stone, but that didn't change 4 years ago in some of the things.
Well, I don't see it. No, I think he had. Mitt Romney, though, we saw it though, and he was the father of healthcare here in Massachusetts. Then he goes, and then he's against healthcare when he runs. No, he helped.
He absolutely wanted it. He wanted it.
But it was
but you also
Just because he
and
does something in
Salvador.
Massachusetts doesn't mean he says you should
He
do it
needed
all
an
around
issue.
the
He
country.
needed an issue. He needed a
it's
big
state
issue.
issue.
That was a
I
big
know,
issue.
but like
he
he-
needed a
National
big
issue.
issue.
Yeah.
That's a whole other discussion.
Right, it's
Yeah, it's another, and we don't have. Why don't we?
But
get
I want to say
some-
real quick, I think you're right. Actually, Governor George Romney said you can't run somebody against nobody. And I feel like Mitt Romney was kind of a nobody. He was this unformed thing, and President Obama was a somebody. He's someone people looked at. So you can't win as a nobody against a somebody. It's not to disparage Governor Romney, but you have to have a fully formed persona if you're going to capture the imagination of the people in this country enough to win the presidency, which only 44 people have had.
Which I think Obama did 4 years ago.
Yep.
He really got people passionate.
Right. And I think if Romney could have, it might be different.
Exactly. And that's where, again, I was very disappointed that Romney did not go after Obama in the last debate about Benghazi. He just left it, just didn't touch it at all.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of there. But
And to me, he just, you know, at that point, it's almost like he just gave up. Again, he was kind of, I don't want to say pandering, but you know, he doesn't want to be confrontational. It's like, just go at it.
Yes.
Tell him who you are, what you believe in.
Yeah,
But
I
at that
agree.
point,
Tell what you believe.
Yeah.
But let's also never forget about, you know, the campaign infrastructure that the Obama campaign has put down since
Unbelievable.
2006,
Yeah,
essentially.
It was
You know, so
fantastic,
never forget
yes.
about that as
No,
well, and their
no.
ability
that makes
to
a
put
huge difference.
They
boots
did a
on the
great
ground.
job.
So.
But we want to cover all the races that I mentioned in the agenda.
Sure.
So why don't we finish up on the U.S. Senate race? It looks like Elizabeth Warren won with 54% of the vote, and Scott Brown got 46% of the vote. So how about we'll have an open discussion to finish up that discussion about the U.S. Senate. What do you think about that? How do you think the debates went? I thought the debates were fantastic with those two, by the way, but you know, very interesting, exciting. I thought they both were well-spoken. I met them both in person, very personable people, very nice. So What are your comments about those candidates? Or
Well, I think before we actually get to that election, let's talk about how Scott got there originally.
Okay.
And never forget the fact that, you know, it was 2009, 2010 when I was sworn in 2009, and there was a lot of anger towards, you know, towards government, towards legislators, both federal and state, and the legislature actually, you know, sort of changed the rules to make sure that Mitt Romney wasn't appointed U.S. Senator, and to make sure that they could appoint Paul Kirk to fill Ted's seat. So there's a lot of anger with the electorate. It's 51% of independents. On top of that, there's healthcare and the whole national issue and the national stage of healthcare, which a lot of people were upset about it, and polls in Massachusetts had folks upset about it as well. You had about 2.1 million people voting in that election, and you had Martha Coakley, who I would think everyone would agree didn't run, you know, the best campaign. And Scott won by 4%. And, you know, sort of holding on to the seat, he started to turn more left and making sure that he kind of created this mantra for himself that he was this maverick. Which, and you know, again, I still say, and I think, you know, everyone here around the table here would agree with as well, I think Scott's, you know, the difference in the election results might have been a little bit different if he focused, I think, less on Native American heritage, less on asbestos, being an attorney for an asbestos, asbestos issues, and at the same time thought more about you know, inside trading, and his legislation to do that is, you know, jobs legislation and don't ask, don't tell. I mean, those are issues that people
positive issues
that people care about, that he had results with and he had a hand in. But I don't know. I don't know which base he was playing to. I think he's playing to the base from the 2010 special and not the 2012 general.
Yeah, that upset me in that first debate between Scott Brown
7
and Elizabeth. Oh, I thought it was 11 minutes.
I might be wrong.
On that Indian heritage thing, which I thought.
And he opened
you know
with
how much
it.
time they spent on Afghanistan, where we have 68,000 troops, some dying, getting maimed? Like 1 minute at the end of that debate, which is David Gregory is partially responsible for that, though the moderator, I think it was him.
Sure.
But
That's why you should be moderating it.
I should, yeah. Nick said it, yeah.
We had this discussion.
Yeah, right,
Nick,
right.
you're too tall to
But anyway,
moderate. All
back
the
to,
candidates
but
are
one
like,
quick answer. I don't want to continue
Well,
the comment.
I disagree a little bit with what Jim said. How Scott
It's a
got
very
in
good
2010.
setup, though.
Yeah, good
You're like
setup.
the Cliff Clavin of
That's right. Well, don't worry, I have a closing too.
You know, the thing that I saw is that he basically did not look at what got him in there in 2010. In 2010, and he's not a Tea Party guy, but the Tea Party stepped in
Right.
and rallied around him because the Tea Party was part of those angry folks.
Right. Well, he did call them patriots, and then he kind of moved away from it.
Exactly, and that's what he should have did.
Yeah.
He should have stuck to those guns on what got him there, and he walked away from what got him there, and that was his big problem. I'm not saying that he would have won, but it would have been a lot closer. I personally, when a good friend of mine, very close friend, donated to Scott Brown. His first election. Did not this time because he was too far left.
Passion that's
Too
not
far
But
left.
who did your friend vote for?
Huh?
Who did your friend vote for?
I don't think he voted for either one.
Interesting.
I don't think he voted for either one.
Yeah, because I will say,
That's a shame.
I'm not sure how it worked out. I mean, obviously, I have the highest regard for Senator-elect Warren, but I do think, I mean, when I was on the campaign trail this summer, I met a lot of people who said, you're a Democrat, I'll vote for you, and I'm going to vote for Scott Brown because he's a little bit in line with what I'm thinking. I'm not sure going hard to the right would have been the right tag for him.
I'm not saying going hard to the right. I'm just saying, you know, lean towards the individuals that got you to where you are today.
But it was
That's
but I think Jim's right. It's a very different race. I mean, what's the differential in voters? Your presidential election.
Million.
That's what. That's
million
the,
three,
that's the
yeah.
difference.
Yeah, but
That's
you know
the-
what? He also won by being very likable.
Right.
Being that relatable
good
person,
point.
and the minute he starts
attack
attacking
ads,
a
absolutely.
female candidate, and that's what I think you guys have a tough time with. You cannot, if a male candidate's run against a female candidate, you start attacking, you're the big bully attacking the woman.
Right.
Especially
And
when your
the
cachet is likability.
Right.
Yeah, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're right.
exactly. And you know, when he brought the truck back in, the pickup truck and the jacket and everything,
It was-
again, it just started being a little
was too late.
disingenuous.
The Professor
Yeah.
Warren in the
Yeah.
debates
Really
trying
true.
to
Yeah.
like,
That's a
it
very
almost
good
seemed
point.
like he waited for the entire debate to say, I'm not in your classroom, Professor Warren. It was kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
I know you were waiting for that punchline.
Here's an
Yeah.
interesting thought that everyone should think about. John Kerry leaves, becomes the Secretary of Defense.
Don't say it.
New poll coming up, a new election coming up. Scott Brown runs.
Of course.
Okay, he's probably going to run.
What is he, the designated hitter
I'm just,
of
Well, he's got a whole infrastructure
so
in
now,
place.
so wait a second. Now we're talking about
not good enough to be a full
no, but hold on a second. He had no new special election, no presidential race. Does Scott Brown win? I don't care who's running against him. Does Scott Brown win?
Well, it depends on who runs. I mean,
Yeah. I think he
Right.
could.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
true. But, you know,
I mean,
I-
you got
I-
46%.
Right, 40. That's
Yeah,
came
he did,
close.
and he's also got the infrastructure in
and
place.
Exactly, and I think
Yeah.
that it's
He's
it's,
always
it's
the
actual
substitute.
play.
He's never the
Another
teacher.
thing.
How's that?
I mean,
line
that's a
go?
little
How's that?
embarrassing. I
Always the
would hope
bride
he
maid,
doesn't
but
do
never
that.
the
No,
bride.
no,
Yeah.
yes, that's it.
That's
You know,
Yeah.
Scott Lehigh wrote a column probably about 3 weeks ago in the Boston Globe, essentially saying that Brown's problem was in his campaign, and I don't think it's Brown's problem, but his campaign's message anyway was sort of dumbing down to Massachusetts, and that is that we understand the whole fact that he's a good guy and he drives a truck. We understand about the Native American stuff, but to talk about it incessantly for 8 weeks. What else are you going to do? And I think
That
that's
was
what independents started thinking too. It's like
Yeah,
I
it's
think he just
ridiculous.
assumed he was going to get such a good chunk of that 51% to 50% unenrolled independent. And we may not be as much of a Democratic state as we used to be. We are a sophisticated state.
If
We're an
he-
intellectual state.
If he had been positive, if he had run on his record, people would have seen him more in the middle and let her be the person that's attacking.
Right.
I think you're right.
Her attitude is
Yeah.
harsh. She
Yeah.
grates on women. She grates on men. And let her wag that
Right.
finger and tell us what to do and,
Right.
let us all react to that. And he would have won.
Yeah,
Right.
well, if I know, Tom, you want to move along. I will say, well, to go back to your talking about the sophistication of the Massachusetts electorate, I think actually that really did play out this time. Because I think Massachusetts always realized that there is some benefit for the good of our state, the good of our Commonwealth, and the nation to have a little balance, Democrat and Republican. That's why we've elected, Republican governors. We always have Democratic senators. But I think right now there's also a realization that things are so gummed up in Washington that it's almost better to just give one party a chance to do something. So at least they do something.
Right.
And if
Certainly,
it doesn't
certainly.
work, then we'll replace them next time. Because
Certainly.
right now it's that
Didn't
deadlock
Obama
that in
have
transit.
both the Senate and the House in his first term?
He did, and he passed
And
healthcare
how'd that work
reform,
out for you?
healthcare reform,
Well,
which I think
the
is an
first 2
amazing
years,
accomplishment.
I think
that was a huge.
sucked.
It's a huge accomplishment. It's a
That was
historic
a huge
accomplishment.
historic win.
How do you
So
feel?
that is something that people have been trying to do for decades. That
Decades,
he was able to
decades,
do
able
it.
to do
So
it.
I
That
think
was
he actually accomplished
that
a
was a
lot.
big
To be
victory.
honest with you, from a businessman standpoint, it's a
Oh no,
disaster.
I know,
Fair
no.
enough.
Let's
Yeah,
not talk
well,
about
that's
right,
not-
but let's not
hey,
talk
well,
about
that's a
This is a whole
different
other
issue.
show.
That's
Yeah,
another
this is
show,
a whole
right.
other
That's
show.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So why don't we move on to the U.S. Congress race for a few minutes, and then I want to make sure we get to Jim's race.
Oh, yeah, we
because he can
definitely
give
want
us
Oh, yeah, we want to hear the
That's
real
right.
scoop.
Real.
Yeah.
So on the U.S. Congress,
When did you know?
wow, our time is really running out.
Go, I'm sorry.
Nikki Songus defeated Jonathan Golnick, and this is the second time she defeated him. This time, she got 65% of the vote.
You need a woman running against Nikki
Jonathan,
Songus.
35%. So, any comments on that?
You need a woman running against Nikki Songus.
Well, I
I
think
would like to nominate.
Oh, no.
I would too.
We'll never love that one.
never forget this too. I mean, Golnick raised what 230,000, something like that in his last race. He had a primary. Songs didn't have a primary as well. But I think the Congresswoman's done a very good job since she's been in there in terms of laying down sort of her framework, her organization, and her supporters throughout
Her
the
machine.
district. Well,
She's got-
but she does do a good job,
And
especially in
then
her,
Yeah.
her email
Well-
approach, her social media approach. But the other thing is that Golnick also got 42% in 2010 in a really tough year for Democrats.
Right. Yes, yeah.
And he had to do something dramatically different in order to improve on that 42%, and he wasn't able to do that. And
Yes.
in fact, he raised less money and got arguably a Tea Party opponent in the primary. So that's
Yes.
I'm
Oh,
not
yes.
surprised he got 34%.
Yeah.
And honestly, as you know, Jim, it's all about working hard too.
Yeah.
Listen. When I was running around this summer, I saw her out there all the time. I never saw him out there.
You never saw him
You've
out
got
there?
to put your shoe leather on the ground if you're going to get this stuff.
I
will
saw
say,
him doing nothing but going out.
Okay, well,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
fair
yeah,
enough.
I
And,
saw him
we
out
didn't
there,
share a whole lot of the same district, so that might be true. But I also think that Congresswoman Songus, her record, listen, as someone individually who's benefited so much from the things she's advocated for, including improved body armor for the troops,
Right,
the enhanced GI Bill. When I was in Afghanistan, 08 to 09, I had body armor that actually protected me. I can't tell you the difference from 03 to 04 when that was not existent. And she was a champion on doing that. And she's also been a huge
Yes.
champion on veterans issues, or women's veterans issues in the state and across the nation.
Yeah.
So she's had the opportunity to sort of get in there and actually get things done. I think people are recognizing, like, hey, this is a woman who cares about her community, cares about her country, and is going to work to make it better.
Yes, yes.
And I think
Nick-
the Sun
oh,
endorsement killed her too. I mean, killed him too because
okay.
you know he really.
Yeah.
I think that was a surprise.
And they
you know,
endorsed
to a
me.
lot
I
of
didn't win.
conservatives.
Oh, you were so close.
They didn't
though.
endorse me my first time. They didn't
Very,
endorse me
very
first time.
close,
They
Joe.
did?
You did a great job.
My
by the
first
way.
ran?
Thank
No, they
you.
didn't.
What are they thinking?
Nick,
I even married the
well,
reporter.
we got to move on to Jim's race, but any quick
The one who
comment?
didn't endorse
I
you?
just
No, she
I
endorses
hold
me.
my, I hold my one comment about Nikki Tsongas as a constituent. I've contacted her office 3 times to address certain issues. Never got a return call. She will never get my support, ever.
I've
under
had the
any
same.
circumstance.
I've had the same
Ever.
experience.
That's important.
That's too
Unfortunately.
bad.
That's how it is.
Yeah,
never,
I think they should
never.
always get back, no matter what office
Exactly.
you hold.
Yeah.
Library trustee, a school committee, state rep, all, get back to everybody right away.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you remember it, and then don't vote for them next time, you're right.
Now, where
But-
does she live? Does she live in Lowell?
Charlestown.
Oh,
Lowell.
Lowell.
Charlestown.
so Jim Arciero,
You want to address in Charlestown?
No, I
You
was
want to address down at the Cape? Like, I got those too.
so Jim,
maybe that's just a summer home.
Yeah.
yeah,
In Charlestown?
Lowell.
You know, the public servants, they have summer homes.
right.
There's actually a little stadium
don't.
named
So
after her
Jim,
husband. in
State
there.
Representative Jim Arciero ran for re-election again this year, and
How'd
he
he do?
defeated Valerie Wormel, the Republican candidate, by 66% to 34%. So Jim, since you're right here on the post-election show, I thought you can give us some insight.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Some
Your
insight.
insight
You know,
onto the-
it was, you know, again, it was a spirited campaign, and we worked really hard on it, and you know, I really have to thank my campaign staff. They did such a great job, and I worked. You know, on August 1st, we were out of recess, and I was out knocking on doors in
Yes.
South Chelmsford and parts of Littleton and Westford, and you know, we did all the things we needed to do to be successful.
So many signs too. Remember, I called you one time. I was going up to Vermont or something, and all I saw was Jim Arciero in Massachusetts.
In Vermont?
A lot of a lot of Jim Arciero signs and one Valerie Wormel sign. And I
I don't think I ever saw one of her signs.
Yeah, I saw one. I was like on Route 225, but so many from Jim. So you sign holders got your
Well,
signs and all.
she
the
ran a good campaign. I mean, she's a member of the Board of Selectmen in Westford.
member of the board.
She got in the race a little late. You know, I think the last
Was
day.
she a write-in?
She wasn't. No, the,
Oh,
the
was it
last
the
day
last day?
she submitted her necessary paperwork and
Yeah.
signatures, et cetera, to get on.
So that's good. I
Well,
mean, she was committed.
she
She followed the
yeah,
process.
absolutely.
Did she concede to you over the phone that
She didn't.
night?
No, she never did.
That's too bad. Plus, she
Oh,
didn't.
No class.
that's not
She
Yeah,
nice.
wasn't
never did.
gracious
No
in her
class. She
remarks
never called.
afterwards. If I, you know,
No,
must
it's
admit-
really
It
unfortunate.
was unfortunate.
It really
yeah.
was unfortunate. She got I don't know, just caught up in sort of the emotions of the night.
Yeah, and she-
it didn't go the way she wanted it to, I guess.
Yeah,
And
that's
yeah, it was
too bad.
unfortunate. But hey, you know, I give credit to anyone who puts their name on the ballot. You know,
Yeah.
it's quite
Oh,
How did you
absolutely.
feel
quite a
that-
process, and there's a lot of nerves involved.
How did you feel that night when the results started coming in and you really felt great and everything?
It was actually, I think it was precinct 7 in Chelmsford was the first one that came in. So I got
You knew it.
So I got 62% in precinct 7 in Chelmsford, which for me was great because in the last 2 elections, even though the first election, you know, I think it was a lot smaller of a margin than that. So,
Wow.
you know, it's gratifying to know that when you put
Yeah.
in the work, you know, people do pay attention.
That's
so.
because of what you've done. There's a
Well,
reason
I hope
why
so.
that's
I hope so.
grown.
Well,
Yeah,
I was
no.
just saying, when you put in the
Listen,
work.
Yeah.
I'm a guy with an R next to my name, and I support Jim.
Yep.
Yeah.
The night that I listened to her speak, I called him up, right? You and I
Yeah, you
spoke.
did.
I called him up. And my first thing out of his mouth is, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Fine, fine, fine." I says, "Is she kidding me?" That's what I said. And I'm the Republican.
Right.
Oh,
You know,
I didn't like
I
what
wasn't
you
impressed.
said
I wasn't impressed with what she had
Even
to say,
during the
and what she
campaign.
brought to the table, and
I thought
I
it
know
was
Jim.
untrue too what she was saying about Jim's trying so hard to get us more Chapter 70 money, right? You guys are in the school committee, and he's tried so hard, and then she tries to bash him on things like that, which is ridiculous.
I've
Yeah,
worked
it's-
with
it's-
I've worked with
everybody
Jim on,
does.
on a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
You know,
I'd love more race to the top money.
Yeah.
That's a call you got to make
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Well,
But
I was happy. I mean, I worked with Janet and Nick on the sort of the McKinley-Vento Act, which was an unfunded
Okay.
mandate, which brings Chelmsford $40,000 a year for homeless school
Yes.
transportation,
Yeah.
and that's a lot. I credit
Right.
to the school committee in Chelmsford for come to the State House and really pushing for
Yes.
that issue.
I would
And
say
municipal
Jim-
health care.
Jim's in Chelmsford, I think, more than I am.
Yeah, yeah, Jim's here a lot, that's for
I
sure.
love
Does
that.
a great job, I think, and Even though I'm
everywhere.
independent, I think I
Yeah.
could say that, right, Jim?
Thanks.
So we have a few minutes up, but I wanted, because we're lucky we have someone who's a state senate candidate and almost won that primary.
It's pretty close.
Very close. And I thought maybe if you can give us your insight on Mike Barrett winning that election against the Republican Sandy Martinez,
Sure.
who was running, I think, for the 4th or 5th time.
I think it was maybe her third time
It's
or
her
so.
third.
She's a Chelmsford
You
native.
sure
so-
it wasn't a 4th?
I think
I
it's
think
a four.
Her
I
fourth,
think it was
maybe
her
her fourth.
fourth.
Yeah,
It was
and
her
I
fourth
could be wrong about
Hey,
that.
I got
the
13 and
numbers
16.
guy.
Okay, anyway, what
Was he
that's-
doing this?
But, you know,
Let me
it
check my
certainly
numbers.
doesn't surprise me
It's on my
that
cufflink.
that a Democrat won this seat because you know, it is a preponderance of a Democratic district, the third Middlesex. I think back in the special elections, one of the few districts that went for Martha Coakley over Scott Brown, and especially with the presidential election with Elizabeth Warren on the ticket, we knew it was going to happen. But I think more importantly than talking about the ifs, ands, or buts of who should have won and who shouldn't have won is now that we have sent someone like a Jim Arciero up to the State House, someone like a Mike Barrett up to the State House, what we need to make sure is that we channel all the energy that we all felt so much through this election. We all worked, no matter what side you were on, and you cared about your candidates, and now understand that the mission of everybody we send there, and also everybody who sent them there, is to get something done to actually move our state forward. And you know, I definitely supported Mike Barrett in the general election. There's no doubt. I fought tooth and nail against him in the primary. There's no doubt against that. But at the end of the day, you never. It's so easy when you are campaigning to get caught up in the how you do it, the mailers, the fundraising, the tactics, you know, the ground game.
Yeah.
You never want to lose sight of why you're doing it. And the reason why you're doing it is because you fundamentally believe, no matter what side of the aisle you fall down on, that government does have a positive role to play in making real differences in our lives.
Yes.
Whether that's bigger or smaller, we can
I was
talk
gonna say,
about.
that's the
yeah,
big
but no,
difference here.
Yeah, bigger. We can talk about that, but understand there is a role for our elected leaders to play in really driving forward positive difference in our lives. Now, we might disagree on how that's done, but I don't think we'd ever disagree on that's the reason you're there. And I just think now the campaign season is behind us, and it got so divisive sometimes, it got so ugly sometimes, but now you don't, I know Jim doesn't run for a day in November when his name is checked next to the ballot. He's running for all the days afterwards, when he can serve up in the state legislature and serve well and serve the communities that sent him there. And I think it's not just our great legislators that need to do that, but it's all of us who care about the process.
Yes. And could I ask you, Joe, what your plans are next for running for office? I think you did a great job. You came very close. You ran a great, I saved all the postcards, by the way, and everything. They were great. What are your plans next, Joe?
Well, you know, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I've definitely, you know, got a job lined up. I definitely loved the running for office this summer was incredible. I mean, I think you're right. The campaign team you build, the organization that becomes part of it, is so inspiring and humbling that people will show up for 30 hours a week for free. And
Now
work
it
for
sounds
you.
like you're running again.
No, but here's the thing I would say is that what I don't want to do is put myself in a tunnel where I'm just looking at what the next job might be, because I think that's another way to lose sight of why you want to do it, and then it becomes how you're going to do
Then
it.
you'll lose the
reason,
genuous
the
part.
reason, yeah, and I feel like the reason is more important
Genuine.
than the result.
Well, the reason I asked all of you to come on this show, Chad, is because I knew you'd do a great job discussing the elections, and you certainly did that. Thank you all very much for doing that. Joe Kearns Goodwin, thank you so much. Hopefully it's the second of many, many times on the show.
I got to pass him 17. I got to start going.
Right. Well, thank you
I
very
thought it was
much, Jim
27.
Arciero. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Carmen.
Thank you very much, Capo Nick DeSilvio.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Capo.
Thank you very much, Janet
We'll tell you
Askenburg.
that
Thank
story
you.
later.
And thank you, this wonderful camera crew, George and Azora and Larry, and our director, Pete Padula.
Carmen, mention my wife.
And Victoria is here today. Victoria Kearns Goodwin with her new puppy. What's your puppy's name?
The puppy's here?
Wally.
Wally,
Named
yeah.
after Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Well, all
It's a
right,
big
that's
name
right,
for a
Wally.
small
They
dog,
got this
though,
new
yeah.
beautiful puppy, and he's like a couple of months old now. He's beautiful. So good luck with that.
Right.
If you have,
Thank you.
yeah. So thank you very much for watching the show. And if you have any comments on the show, please send me an email at tcristiano@comcast.net. Please, if you live in Chelmsford, please pay attention to 2 weeks from tonight. We have a show with all kinds of local town leaders, the community development director, the library director, conservation committee, etc. All about Chelmsford. Next show. Thank you very much. Ciao.